we've got to be focused on restoring trust in our government. Period, full stop. Listen to Michigan. We are not a flyover state. We are a destination state.
A lot of membership who identify as pro-Trump. How do we win those voters over? And what did we do wrong to get it to this point?
Why don't we have readily available food for our students in our schools? This is self-inflicted. This is something that Donald Trump is doing to the people of Michigan, and I will not stand for it.
Smart investments from the public sector can empower the private sector in important ways.
If not but for the federal government, who plows the fields, who sets the table, who paves the road, and then, yes, allow industry to flourish, to, frankly, upend all of global trade through what I see is erratic, shoot-by-the-hip, inconsistent, uncertainty-making tariffs.
Congresswoman Haley Stevens, welcome to the People's Cabinet.
Hey, I'm excited to be here. I am in the People's Cabinet, right?
So Michigan is always at the center of the political universe. In 92, it became reliably Democratic, went to President Obama. President Obama won it as well. Donald Trump in 2016, back to Biden, back to Donald Trump. So my first question to you as someone who grew up there, who is a public official there, what can the rest of the country learn from the dynamics in Michigan and how we win again?
Well, we just love for everyone to keep focusing on Michigan because we have an amazing story to tell. And in fact, if you think about it, at the turn of the century, people were sort of starting to ask the question about who's going to turn out the lights on Detroit. Time magazine had that infamous cover story saying just that. People were pretty much betting against us, let Detroit go bankrupt, forget Michigan. And it's been a complete story of renaissance and innovation and, frankly, doubling down on who we are as a people. Full of a whole heck of a lot of resilience. And, I think about my time in the Obama administration working as chief of staff on that auto rescue for Steve Ratner and Ron Bloom. And that was in the heart of that time period when we were the nadir of the Great Recession. And we put forward a set of actions to save those two companies from going belly up, saving hundreds of thousands of Michigan jobs while we were at it. And now today, 15 years later, there's a whole new story to tell. Detroit's population is growing. Our economy is growing. We have the highest rate of jobs in over 50 years, particularly thanks to some of the things that I got an opportunity to work on, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, an infrastructure bill that allowed us to rebound from some of the hardships of the supply chain disruptions that hit with the arrival of a global pandemic. And so I think everyone can take away a story of 21st century resilience from Michigan. And it's certainly not just Detroit. I mean, it's places like West Michigan that are growing in population as well, that have all new economies and growing economies there as well. And frankly, very good leadership in our state that begins with Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
And can you talk about how that translates to voting and the nature of how we've seen Michigan go from blue to red and back and forth?
Yeah, look, I mean, we have had fantastic voter participation. I'm the Congresswoman for Michigan's 11th District. It used to be Oakland and Wayne County. Now it is exclusively Oakland County. So I don't even represent the whole county because it's 1.2, 1.3 million people. And our congressional district's just shy of 800,000 people. And yet 470,000 people voted in my congressional district in the last presidential election. And look, I'll say that our electorate is in some pockets very well exercised, but there's other people who, frankly have been, maybe sporadic voters or not participating in a way that we've expected. And so we've got to double down. We've got to continue to reach out into communities, of course, like Detroit. I also represent Pontiac, Michigan, and that's an area, when Pontiac votes, Michigan wins because that really speaks to the heart of who we are as a state. And we also have rural populations that can't be forgotten or let behind. So in terms of what's motivating voters to reelect Governor Whitmer overwhelmingly and to see her popularity right now in our state as someone who gets things done for Michigan, that's what I've always tried to encompass as someone who's been on the ballot and also so privileged to do the work here in the House of Representatives for the great people of Michigan, which is, I want to win for Michigan because I like to get things done for this state. I like to pass the laws that I've done, like the Building Blocks of STEM Act that are delivering for our schools. Our governor has spoken directly to the heart of our infrastructure economy, fixing the damn roads, as she said it. And that's really something that she's rolled up her sleeves to do, and the voters rewarded her for it. And I think in terms of what happened last election, I'm not here to totally relitigate it. It was a close election, and there's a lot at stake, and what we're seeing right now is exactly all of that playing out. Chaos coming down from this Trump administration, wreaking havoc literally on people's lives. People everywhere I go, Dan, are worried about rising costs. Just putting a grocery bill on a credit card that really feels like a big squeeze to people, while they're also feeling that job insecurity coming down from erratic shoot by the hip tariffs that are also increasing costs, threats to people's Medicaid. That's a reality that was in the big tax scam of a bill, in my opinion, that really would strip away Medicaid from 750,000 Michiganders. How can you see that go on when costs are already so high? Where does that get compensated for? It doesn't. And who pays? Michiganders. And so that's why I step up each and every single day here in my role in the United States House of Representatives on behalf of the people of Michigan to showcase what Michigan needs, who we're made of, what we are. And yes, there's a whole heck of a lot of bragging points, and it's not just that the Tigers are having one heck of a season over here and the fact that the lights are on in Detroit, but it's really that we have a story to tell.
So if the world and the Democratic apparatus all listen to Congresswoman Haley Stevens solely, what would your message to the entire Democratic apparatus be about it? This is how we win swing states.
Yeah, well, first, listen to Michigan. And I'll tell you that I am fighting for our dignity, the dignity, you hear Sherrod Brown always talk about that, former Senator Sherrod Brown, the dignity of work. Well, oh my goodness gracious, I am here for the dignity of who we are as Michiganders and what it means to be a Michigan worker. If you're in the automotive sector, defense, aerospace, if you're a teacher in one of our classrooms and, have gone through so much, and so many respects. And we really need to see public education, STEM education, continue to be invested in and advance. So that all encompasses to me this dignity portion. If you're retired, the dignity that you've earned your retirement, respect for what Michigan's role means in our nation's economy. Of course, as a hub of automotive manufacturing and innovation, but also, frankly, as a place that we make things, we grow things, and we grow things because we have all that fresh water. We are a peninsula state. It is one of the most unique places in the entire country. We are not a flyover state. We are a destination state, and that deserves respect at the lawmaking table, at the electoral table. I mean, I'm over here, pushing for greater representation for Michigan. And that last piece of this, Dan, it was part of this message that I want to give to people, is this is about trust. It's who can I trust to advance and advocate for our needs and what we represent. Of course, I get to do that every day as a federal lawmaker. And I think for, people who are playing in other spheres, we've got to be focused on restoring trust in our government. Period, full stop. There are obviously rampant abuses of power at play right now, and that is leading to some of the chaos and confusion that we see coming day in and day out from the Trump administration that is really just an insult to so many people who are dealing with these rising costs, who are worried about the threats to their earned benefits. Honestly, you'd be so surprised how many people come up to me about their Social Security. Their Social Security? Well, Elon Musk, called it a Ponzi scheme, and people are worried, and they're checking their bank accounts for those payments.
You were chief of staff of President Obama's auto rescue task force. I don't mean to go through a whole history lesson of the auto industry in Michigan, but I'd love for you to spend just a couple minutes just giving a little bit of the overview. What happened that you came in to help rescue with President Obama, and what we can learn from that in the environment of President Trump's vision for manufacturing and tariffs therein.
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity to share something that's so near and dear to my heart and my life's work. And without going on for hours, what I will share is that as the Great Recession hit this country, the Obama administration made a concerted effort for what I called the Main Street effort of that financial crisis. And that Main Street effort being that we could not let General Motors and Chrysler go belly up. We could not let these two companies liquidate, that dollars were available and allocated to stabilize those companies, but also allow them to reemerge healthy and innovative.
And if I can ask,
Yeah.
was this a trend already with globalization? Like, I want people to understand the trend
Yeah,
of
what led to that?
globalization even before the financial crisis that General Motors and those companies were already dealing with.
Okay, because we all know the story, the Great Recession. Yeah, the capital markets were rocked, and because of bad policy, and the automakers alongside the housing sector and the insurance sector took hits. We had legacy costs that were very much a long-time problem for our automakers, who guaranteed, alongside our labor movement, rightfully, the dignity of being able to retire with health benefits and retirement benefits. And when we walked into the auto rescue, I kept thinking, well, isn't this because we don't have something like the ACA, that all of these legacy costs, which were saddling our nation's automakers, were a reality? Well, a decade later, economic studies showed that that was part of the cause, that we hadn't righted our own ship here in the United States of America, that we have been, as we know, particularly since this century began, been competing with the likes of China, the Chinese Communist Party, and their lack of following the rules-based industrial world order. So what does that mean for a place like Michigan? I was working on the west side of our state in 2006 alongside the UAW, Dan, and I will tell you right now, my UAW friends were telling me how scrap and dumping from China were lowering costs, were contributing to the diminishing of quality of automobiles, that we weren't able to keep up in some respects, and it's because there weren't guardrails put into place. You obviously also hear about intellectual property that is oftentimes not followed by the Chinese Communist Party. That was squeezing our automakers. Trade rules that weren't fair, that were squeezing our automakers. And so you ask a good question about the current administration's attempt to rejigger our trade relationships, to frankly upend all of global trade through what I see is erratic, shoot by the hip, inconsistent, uncertainty-making tariffs. We all know that strategic tariffs can absolutely work, that we need some tools in our toolkits to push back on the Chinese Communist Party. But we can't have policies that just change by the minute. And that is what we have had here from Donald Trump. 55 tariff announcements in 100 days. No deal for Michigan, no new factory openings, no new jobs coming in. Every once in a while you hear, another country's maybe come to the table. Coming after Canada, where American companies oftentimes operate with union workers, sometimes even our own Michigan workers, it's head spinning, it's head scratching. We can't wake up to new global trade announcements every single day. People need certainty. Our small businesses need certainty. Our consumers need certainty. And I'm really frustrated by it. And it's one of the reasons why I continue to put up my hand, to speak out, and to paint this picture for people. And it's not because I want to, score some zingers on social media. This is just reality for us in Michigan. And what people are saying, Dan, is that this reminds them, and here we are in the People's Cabinet talking about it. And the people are saying that this reminds them of what happened in 2020 when a global pandemic hit our shores. And I know that's not a pleasant thing to bring up because that was a global health crisis, but it was also an incredible disruption. This is self-inflicted. This is something that Donald Trump is doing to the people of Michigan, and I will not stand for it.
You talked a little bit about Canada, and obviously being from Michigan, you see the Canadian-American relations up close. Are there stories that come to mind or that constituents tell you? I just want to be able to humanize the relationship strain that Donald Trump has caused.
Yeah, let me give you a macro story and then a more individualized and personalized one quickly. At the macro level, when we heard that there were going to be a 50%, out of nowhere, 50% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum in particular, you have a lot of smelters over there in Canada. There are American companies that are up there. We're working on aluminum. It's getting produced. It's coming into the United States. It's going into our manufacturing base. And all of a sudden you hear a 50% tariff on that, with the idea that, okay, the aluminum will come back to the United States. And then the friendly reminder sinks in that it is $6 billion to build a new smelter. And at the same time, when the president's saying, well, we don't need something like the CHIPS Act, which is an industrial policy, a co-investment strategy using, yes, taxpayer dollars for spend that beget an investment from the private sector to regrow an industry. How the heck is that going to happen? I mean, what aluminum company is going to be able to get a $6 billion line of credit to build a new smelter? Oh, and by the way, where are you going to build the smelter? And how are you going to get the codes for it? And that's something else we need to work on. And then I think on the personal front, outside of manufacturing, a lot of our nurses come from Canada. Look, I knock on doors in my neighborhoods in Michigan, and of course, every time you knock doors, hey, are you voting? Well, my significant other is, but I'm actually Canadian. I mean, it's a stone's throw away. And so
Literally, in your case.
Literally. And so the exchange between the two countries is tied to our workforce and our success. And honestly, our hospitals have been coming up to us and just saying, we're a little worried about this because all of a sudden we're feeling squeezed. Or a person saying to me, I don't know, am I going to be able to continue this line of employment? And it's just a reminder of how intertwined we are. And it's been pretty frustrating to hear about that. And frankly, as someone who really celebrates this relationship and is eager to also remind when we did the auto rescue in the Obama administration, that happened because the Canadians were able to be partners with us. They participated. They also put skin into the game. Their unions, their supply chain was a part of that auto rescue alongside us. And so I hate to see fighting for fighting's sake. I hate to see tensions ratcheting up when, frankly, we need to be strengthening our trade relationships with our allies as we look to push back on the Chinese Communist Party and their approach to trade and their disruption to the rules-based order that we've established for so many years now.
So you've alluded to working class voters, how they feel strained under this administration and the work that was done under the Obama administration and other places. But I think, and one of the things I should say that you were a leader on is the Butch Lewis Act, which provided an opportunity to make unions whole on their pensions. Despite that, there still appears to be, in polling and otherwise, a lot of working class voters, in particular union voters, not necessarily leadership, some leadership, but a lot of membership who identify as pro-Trump. And so my question to you is, how do we win those voters over, and what did we do wrong to get it to this point?
Yeah, well, we've got to continue to meet people where they're at. We've got to be in union-rich neighborhoods and communities, regardless of how they vote. And I really find myself to be a champion of the 21st century labor movement. And I really appreciate you bringing up the Butch Lewis Act, because I said, hell or high water, I'm getting to Congress to do the Butch Lewis
And can you explain a little
legislation.
bit more about what that is?
Yeah, well, it was a unforgiven part of our Great Recession activities, not on the auto rescue, but just as a country. We left the pensioners unwhole, and they had our multi-employer pension plans had a large gap, and they were frankly not going to be able to provide the pensions to their pensioners that they had paid, these individuals who they had paid into their whole lives. It was a lot of Teamsters. In particular, the Teamsters Union, and Butch Lewis was an actual real pensioner who fought to get this legislation introduced and done. And frankly, I saw this as something attached to work that I had been a part of that I wanted to see get done. And the way it eventually got done was through the American Rescue Act. So this second chapter of, or I guess the next chapter to recovery activities that happened during the pandemic period of time, it was included in there, and thank goodness it was. We also got to go over to the Carpenters Union at the tail end of last year and look hundreds of union workers in the face and say, your pensions are now going to be made whole. Because what we all know is when a pension goes bankrupt, it goes through something called the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. Well, in this instance, that wasn't going to work because it was too big. Multi-employer pension plans over decades and decades that had taken a beating from the Great Recession, from what happened on Wall Street. And it wasn't a whole heck of a lot of new taxpayer money, but it was the damn right thing to do, and I'm proud we did it.
80 billion? Is that right?
Something to that tune.
Something to that tune. I want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit more about the Auto Rescue Task Force, because one of the things that we try to do on this podcast is not just talk about Donald Trump and what he's doing to the country, but also what the alternative vision is. And so if you could give a little bit more for our listeners about what the turnaround was like and what lessons can we learn from that when there's a Democratic president, when there's hopefully a Democratic Senate, how we use that as a model for reviving American manufacturing in the right ways.
Yeah, and I appreciate it because in some ways it really is our recent history that parlays exactly into some of the challenges that we're looking at today. It led to the awakening around proven industrial policy here in the United States of America. And at the time, what had occurred during the Great Recession is that the two biggest purchases for an American consumer, their housing and their car, had become out of reach for individuals. And our car sales dropped to some of the lowest rates adjusted for population size and ability. These car purchase rates just plummeted. And we never really knew exactly how it would rebound in terms of the full number. But let's say we were selling, the number was about 9 million during the Great Recession, and that was a real low. And by the midway point of the next decade, it had rebounded to about 13, 14. Then by the end of the decade, it was getting closer to 18. And it just felt so good to see these companies, alongside their incredible workers, be able to reinvest, to stick to their knitting, but also to lead in areas of new innovation. And they're the ones who've been really pushing for these new mobility solutions. And so what we saw is, yes, a large investment from the federal government to stabilize General Motors and Chrysler, but it wasn't only paid back, Dan. We made money off of it.
You see a lot of people, in particular, most recently Elon Musk, just kind of denigrate the public sector's role in anything, right? Kind of painting federal employees and initiatives around manufacturing, what have you, as bloat and inefficiency, when in reality it is smart investments from the public sector can empower the private sector in important ways.
Yeah, that is an incredible rallying call. And frankly, lessons that I learned during the Obama administration. If not but for the federal government, who plows the fields, who sets the table, who paves the road, and then, yes, allow industry to flourish. And this is why sometimes it has felt really frustrating when we've tried to invest in just basic infrastructure here in the United States of America in the 21st century. We get our hands tied. And you don't have a private sector company that's going to fix the water pipes in our country. And in Michigan, Great Lakes State, I spent a lot of time with the Great Lakes Water Authority, and they have told me time and time again in this very office that we have got to allocate dollars to fix these 100-foot, 70-foot pipes. They're providing water to all the homes here or all the homes in Michigan, or in Southeast Michigan for that matter. And it's not to say that the federal government has to do it all, but that partnership and that effective utilization of dollar really matters. It's the same thing with our schools. Why don't we have readily available food for our students in our schools? I mean, that is still something that we are pushing for. And we've achieved that at the state level in Michigan. Free lunch. We need lunch for our students, straight up. These are just basic investments that we could be doing here in our country that are going to only pay dividends to our taxpayer. The private sector looks at ROI. I like to call it ROS. What is our return on spend? And we've gotten that over and over again when we've done good industrial policy that I want to see continue to flourish, and why I'm working so hard here in the United States House of Representatives.
And not dissimilarly, we had Arthi Prabhakar on, the head of Office of Science and Technology Policy, talking about how work the public sector did with Moderna and other places were some of the reasons why they were ultimately able to prosper.
Yeah. And she's a fantastic leader, by the way. I treasured my time working with her as the head of OSTP, and she had such great visions on things just like that, in the health sciences space, but also in artificial intelligence, really, helping us to paint a vision for how we can continue to lead on this. And newsflash, our auto industry has been using AI applications for a very long time to improve our efficiency, our production. It's not taking away jobs, but it is allowing us to compete with the likes of the Chinese Communist Party that actually became the largest exporter of vehicles a little over a year and a half ago, surpassing Japan.
My last question to you is, there's a lot of disaffected voters still out there. I think a lot of people still candidly traumatized by the outcome of the election in 2024, or maybe even they voted for President Trump and are now looking at what's happening and saying, I didn't vote for that, right? And I'm sure you have conversations with people all over the political spectrum every day in your district and all across the state. My question to you is, what is your message to listeners who know those people and want to figure out ways to get people re-engaged and get people involved? Maybe it was the first time voting in 2024, but felt like, why am I involved here? I'm seeing, it wasn't the candidate that I wanted, and now I'm seeing all the effects of it. What's your message to them to get them to either stay engaged or re-engaged?
Yeah, and actually, something that you and I share in common as millennials, who I guess still want to be a cool and relevant generation, even though we're now sort of getting surpassed by the Gen Z and alphas and the whatnot. But, we have really got to be looking at the creative ideas and innovations in the own workings of our government. I still really believe in this place, and I am not afraid to think deeply or creatively about ways in which we can reestablish that trust. I really believe this goes back to trust. And in fact, I was with a great group of Michiganders just the other weekend, and folks were talking about the drinking age, and that it was 18 at one point, and now it's 21, and going off to war and the age of that, and when people were able to vote, and these were things that were constitutional amendments, and even the ways in which our Congress works. It is such a privilege to be able to do work I love on behalf of people who inspire me each and every single day in the place that I'm from, this incredible place in the world called Michigan. But what I want to make sure is that Michigan is really getting its fair share of federal resources. And yes, through these types of exchanges and through the work that happens in this very office that we're talking in, where we're coming up with legislation and some of these new ideas, but also thinking even bigger in terms of how our government is set today to function for today. And I believe that that has really contributed to some of that disengagement. And in Michigan, all people want is truly our fair share. They want a peace of mind. They certainly, don't mess with our Lions fans, okay? Because, we've really kind of rebounded off of decades of, again, being written off the map, and some good things are happening, and all this resurgence. But in terms of how people look at their government, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, which was spoken, almost 60 some years ago now. We've got to realize why that's maybe changed for people. That they're saying we're paying a lot of tax dollars, we're seeing still high debt, high deficit. And, those of us who've put into place policies like the CHIPS and Science Act that have really led to great results. The Affordable Care Act, to give another example, that was an achievement that was done right around the same time that we were working on the auto rescue. Now it's hands off our health care. Don't repeal the ACA. I mean, voters have spoken loud and clear on that over and over and over again. And so we've got to think about the next chapter, not just of the policies, but the ways in which we're going to improve government to its best functionality. I will stop there because I could go into a whole other long monologue, which, we don't really like to do on podcasts about all these fun ideas. Some of it really just has to do with giving the most attention and love to Michigan, because I find it outrageous with all of our Great Lakes that we don't have more representation. Maybe the Great Lakes should get us some more representation in of itself, but we tend to just look at population. But let's continue to think deep, and I'm also encouraging the next generation to do that too, and why this is part of why I was so excited to get on the People's Cabinet podcast today. So thank you so much for having me.
Congresswoman Haley Stevens, thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the People's Cabinet. If you did, please like, subscribe, ring that bell, and put in the comments below who else you'd like to see sworn in. And stay tuned for new episodes every Tuesday. Let's go.